Okay. Okay, guys, I think we got a quorum, and we're going to get started. We've got 7 bills today, but we are going to start with Senate Bill 275 from Senator Simon Ayer. And Senator, I've got 3 people signed up to be part of your panel. And I've got David Dragic. I don't want to muck the name up. Dragix or Dragix. I apologize. Joseph Pruden be the second witness, and then Senator NOAA-OMAO. What does that represent? What is that? Commissioner.
Unfortunately, he had a conflict at the last minute.
Okay.
It was Rear Admiral Carey. He was going to be here, but they do have his written testimony.
Okay.
But I guess being that high up, you get other responsibilities.
That's how it works. Okay. Well, we've got your two panelists at the table with you, and it's all yours on Senate Bill 275.
Thank you. And for the record, Senator Brian Simon Ayer presenting Senate Bill 275. As I said, the Rear Admiral Carey could not be here at the last minute. He did submit testimony, but I did want to read just one excerpt of his testimony. And it says, I wanted to extend my appreciation to Senator Simon Ayer and the co-sponsors of this comprehensive legislative package. Your diligent work will result in modernizing Maryland's military laws, which will have a profound and lasting impact not only on NOAA Corp, but on all 8 uniformed services. This is a historic effort to bring fairness, clarity, and consistency to support those who have sworn an oath to serve our nations. I just wanted to get that on the verbal record. So what we have, I don't like PowerPoints too much, but there are a lot of details, and I'm a visual person, so maybe this will help you as well. So what we have before us today is a package that's the most comprehensive overhaul in Maryland history that I know of, at least modern history of our military laws. We are updating over 500 references, approximately 230 sections in nearly every article dealing with our veterans, service members, reserves, and National Guard. So just to give you an idea of what we have here, the package is consisting of this bill, Senate Bill 275, and it's supported by 7 other bills dealing with health, education, a range of topics. But this bill basically sets up the structure for it. And so what is the problem we're trying to solve? You'll find inconsistent definitions throughout our code in all different articles. For example, our service member. In health articles, it's defined one way. In education, it's defined another way. In financial institution, it's defined another. Just differences of how they implement it. So not only are they inconsistent, but they're also undefined terms. We have reserve component, military families, armed forces, they're all undefined. And things like veteran, it's defined one way in general provisions and another way in state government. So that is mainly the problem. So what are the negative outcomes of having this? It creates confusion. It creates inconsistent benefits among our service members. And when you try to update it, it's a nightmare. And then it's also out of sync with our federal agencies when you use terminology. So how do we resolve this? Solution-based. 3 main things. The first thing, we completely restructure our laws into the 21st century. Secondly, we equally treat all our service members where appropriately. And then third, we authorize the department to support our service members. And as you can see, the benefits, equal access for benefits and service, consistent treatment among all members, easy revisions in the future, which we'll go over later, and simplifies the interaction with our federal government. So let's talk about completely restructuring our laws. How do we accomplish that? 3 main things. We standardize, centralize, and modernize our military laws. I used my engineering background to come up with this, and I think we have a wonderful transformational product here. So the first thing is, all these varying definitions we have throughout our articles, we're going to standardize them to federal definitions. And just give you an example of that. This will create a base definition that another article will take those base definitions and say for like service member, you take in the service member's definition and say health wants to say they also have to be a Maryland resident. They can add on the qualifiers to that, but they're all starting at the base definition. We're also working on a couple little tweaks with the department because they have a certain vision of where they want to go forward, especially with veterans. And so we want to make sure we incorporate that vision into the structure, not change the policy, but keep the structure so they can do that. And let me just say up front, the goal of this package was not to change the underlying policies that we have in place, but to make them consistent across the articles. If we started bringing in policy changes, this is about 200 pages, you would never get it through. So the goal is keep underlying policies the same, but make them equal. The other thing is centralization. As you see on the left, you have all these local definitions. And I love this part. I love a lot about this bill, but I love this part where you have all these local definitions being defined. What we're doing is we're creating one central location where the definition is defined, and then all the other articles are just referencing that one place. So for example, last year we passed a bill updating Space Force, being part of the armed forces. Well, they had to go through all the articles and try to find out where Space Force would go in. And it ended up being around 15 different places in different articles. After this bill is passed, that same update would go to one location, you'd update it, and then since everything was referencing it, it would be done, one location. So it makes it much easier for future revisions, and it also keeps it consistent. So the third thing in this is modernization. And that's just basically bringing terms up to the 21st century. We currently have in the law where it talks about military ID. They've updated that to be Uniformed Services ID, which brings in all 8 branches. Another one is our reserve components. Since our laws were put in place, we have another reserve created, which is not in many parts in our law. So it just brings those up to date. So then we go to the second thing, equal treatment across service members. How do we accomplish that? Well, first, let's talk about a little terminology so everybody's on the same page. The uniformed services consist of 8 branches. 6 are military branches, which most people know. You have the armed forces. You have Air Force, Army, Coast Guard, Marines, Navy, and then recently Space Force. They have reserve units under them, including the National Guard. Then on the other side, you have 2 non-military branches, which are part of the uniformed services. You have PHS, which is the United States Public Health Services, and NOAA, which is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. The CC was covering it. And they have commissioned corps, or officer corps. And the PHS also has a newly created Ready Reserve Unit. So that's the structure we're talking about when we're talking about uniformed services. Now, many people know about the armed forces, but what do PHS and NOAA do to serve and protect our nation? It's a wide range of areas. The one thing I did forget to say in the last slide, both PHS and NOAA are headquartered here in Maryland, Montgomery County. One's in Bethesda, one's in Silver Spring. But for those operations where they actually help our military branches, NOAA was actually supporting the mine sweeping in the Persian Gulf. They also coordinate their weather data with almost every military operation that occurs. And then you think of PHS, they sent approximately 800 Corps officers over to Afghanistan to support the conflict going on there. And then PH also went over to Africa to help with the Ebola outbreak so it didn't come back to America. So they're protecting and serving our nation just like any of the other branches. And that's why this bill is here. We believe that all 8 branches deserve equal respect and treatment. And we in the General Assembly understand that. The only thing is we've been doing it piecemeal. As you'll recall, some bills that came in last year, the governor's bill, they put the uniformed services in, but there are so many inconsistencies throughout the law. I was going to fix what I heard in this committee, and I just started diving in, and it was like, this is widespread across all of law. So I put a couple hundred hours into this, believe it or not, to get this to work, and I think we have a really good product. So the second point is equal treatment. How do you accomplish that? So what you do, a lot of it is changing armed forces term to uniformed services. But it was not simply a find and replace. We went through every single term and saw if it was appropriate because the PHS and NOAA don't have the the artillery training and the gun training that the armed forces do. So in public safety, for example, they have an exception for armed forces dealing with explosives. We did not give that to NOAA and PHS because it didn't apply. So we went through every single term. The other one is making, instead of military terminology, we made an inclusive language that covered all 8 uniformed services. And as I said, it applied to almost every article. The last thing we did was we authorized the department to support our service members. And if you look at their website, you will see a mission statement there, which they just recently updated, I think, this year, that includes service members, and that's what we put into our law here, into this legislation. But even before they updated it, service members were part of their mission statement. The problem we had was there was no authority in law for them to support our military, our service members, only veterans. So what this does, it basically codifies existing duties, but it grants them the authority to do it. Now, the final miscellaneous things, the way I've organized this in 8 bills, I've tried to put it based on subject matter by committee. If I put in one bill, it'd been about 200 pages, and every committee would have been secondary on that legislation. So if you deal with criminal law or public safety or transportation or anything, I've organized it by committee. So health and all that goes into finance, public safety goes over to JPR and so forth. We also put a definition of military families in here. If you recall last year, we changed the title of the department to its, instead of Veterans Affairs, now it's Maryland Veterans and Military Families. Well, military families is not inclusive of the non-military branches. So we've defined that to include that. And that's not out of the ordinary. Over in the state personnel and pensions, they define military service and they include NOAA and PHS. So well within our scope there. The last thing I want to mention is general provisions. There's a general provisions article which basically has a rules of interpretation. And so what that is, it's basically a catch-all. So if I define, just pick a veteran in an article, we will use that definition. But if for somehow I forgot to put the definition in, the way it works is it'll go to the general provision and say, is there any definition for veteran that we could use? If not, then I think it goes to case law and so forth. So we put these terms in there which reference back to state government again, hence the centralization. So it'll be a catch-all for any definition. Last thing I was talk about, I just want to thank everybody involved. I've dealt with about 12 different state departments. I've reached out directly to the uniformed branches, military advocate groups, legal experts, law professors, numerous stakeholders, but I really want to give a shout out to DLS. They know me better than probably their own family during the interim. And Jody Chelson, she's just done an amazing job. And like I said, we're working on just a couple amendments to tweak it and give you my vision how this will work. We have 8 bills. This is the cornerstone of it. It sets up the structure and the definitions. So we will work to get this finalized, everybody agree. And at that point, the other bills will then take any modifications we put in the definitions to put in their bills and then have it ready to go. We're doing the same thing in the House in a bipartisan manner with 5 sponsors over there. They're going to do the same thing. Once we have it all together, we'll get all the amendments we agree upon and then ship it over to the other House so they'll be in the same form. So that is the plan. And I'll just say working with the uniformed services, they said this will be a model for other states because they're seeing the same thing in other states where they're doing piecemeal. And they said, this is comprehensive. This is the way to do it. I put a lot of work into this, and I think we've got a great project with this. So I will leave it at that, and I can answer any question you have, I think. If not, I will get back to you.
Let's take your 2 panelists first, and then we'll open questions. So each of you is going to have 2.5 minutes, although we're going to give you some latitude here. Tell us who you are, and then you can you'll give your testimony. Okay, so we'll start with you right there, sir, and put that mic close. And again, give us your name, and then you can proceed.
Good afternoon, Chair Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, and members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity to address you regarding Senate Bill 275, the Modernization of Military Laws Act. My name is Joseph Pruden, and I represent the nearly 81,000 members of the American Legion family in 157 posts throughout the state of Maryland. As a proud veteran and advocate for our military and veteran communities, I strongly believe this legislation is a critical step forward in aligning Maryland's laws with the federal standards. By standardizing the definitions and broadening the scope of who is recognized as a veteran, this bill ensures equitable access to benefits and services for all who have served, including members of the Public Health Service and NOAA. Just as importantly, it also empowers the Secretary of Veterans and military families to better support transition from service to civilian life, which is vital for our veterans and their families. This modernization is not just about updating language. It's about honoring the sacrifices of all service members and ensuring they receive the support they've earned. We thank Senator Brian Simonaire for his efforts and for sponsoring this bill. We urge your favorable consideration of this legislation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Go next. Tell us your name.
Chair Feldman and members of this committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify in favor with amendment of Senator Simonaire's bill. I'm Dave Dragic, a retired Army Colonel and Legislative Director for the Maryland Military Coalition. We strongly support this bill's modernization of the Maryland Code, making it consistent with the U.S. Code in using key terms related to the uniformed services and making the use of those terms consistent throughout the Maryland Code. This is critical, as a lower percentage of our population serves or has served in the uniformed services. 88% of the current 185 members of the Maryland General Assembly have never served in uniform. That's all the more reason to ensure that the usage of these terms in Maryland Code is clear and correct, leaving no opportunity for misinterpretation and for our position on the term veteran in SB 275. And our position with regard to the amendment is to make certain that those who have served in the PHS and NOAA continue to have the same rights and benefits as those veterans who have served in the armed forces and received a DD Form 214 that is other than dishonorable. Our position is to make certain that all federal and state legal references supporting that clearly indicate the same thing to all who will use these references in the future. That's why we've worked with the Senator in requesting this amendment to avoid any misuse of the term or misinterpretation of who is a veteran in any future legislation or policy making. So the Maryland Military Coalition strongly supports SB 275 and asks for a favorable with amendment report from this committee. And we would like to thank Senator Simonaire for sponsoring this important legislation and appreciate his leadership on this issue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll take questions. We'll start with Vice Chair Kagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, thank you all for your service, for your advocacy, and for speaking up for those who don't have the time, ability, or awareness to come and speak. And the Maryland Military Coalition, my constituent and friend, Jason Spiegel, is very active, as you know.
He sends his regards.
Thank you. He's quite wonderful. Senator Simonaire, I just have two quick questions. One, if I missed it, I assume that you were collaborating with the Department of Veterans Affairs and probably also Senator Giles, and she's such a leader on these issues. Are they both copacetic and in agreement with all of this?
So to answer that, I've had quite a military legislative package this year. So I've put in, believe it or not, close to 20 bills.
Dang.
Besides the military package, I've worked with the department, and from everything I can see, all those bills they support. With this one, it was the department was working on a similar, probably a smaller scale doing this. They eventually decided not to move forward with this year, given the fiscal note and so forth, that potentially could happen. So we weren't able to share information at that point. So I've been in communication with them since then. I've shared this information. I've been working with the governor's office. They're appreciative of the vision. They want to see what the fiscal note is, obviously. With this bill, the fiscal note is within the current budget, so we don't have any fiscal with that. We'll see the other ones. I've also told them that if there is an unsuspected, really big fiscal note, which I didn't anticipate, we can work that, and we may just wait for next year or year after to do that one specific area. But we've been working very collaboratively on this. And I want to thank them for their support and knowledge on this subject as well.
That's great. I want to echo your support, your endorsement of Jody Chilson. I've worked with her over many, many times over the years, and she's one of the many terrific folks we have in the Department of Legislative Services. Just curious whether any part of this, you didn't specifically reference it, was there gender language that needed to be updated? Did we have servicemen and stuff then changing now to service members?
I don't think there's any in this bill. In another bill, drafters did that, just automatically updated
Yeah.
it. Instead of making it his, they made it member or something
Yes.
like that.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for your leadership and the time you've invested. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Senator Augustine.
Thank you, Chair Feldman. Thank you all for your service. Senator, as I look at this particular piece of legislation, I might be misreading it, but it looks like you are removing references to those who are dishonorably discharged. And why would you do that?
Yes, and so thank you for that question. We are amending honorable back in the legislation where it was. So just give you a little background. We are using the federal definition, 38 U.S.C. 101. The way I had initially looked at it, I thought honorable was part of the definition. It's other than dishonorable, which means something different. So JVEC, or the Joint Veterans Commission, brought that point up, and I said, you know what, that's an oversight. So anywhere specifically that we mention honorably in the code, we will restore that honorably. But the standard definition, current law, is other than dishonorable. So that is the base definition in current law.
Thank you.
Okay, well, obviously, we'd be helpful if we could get the Department of Veterans Affairs and military families, as supportive of the bill, and I think they're close to getting there. But you referenced some amendments and things of that nature. So how, give it for the benefit of the committee, how close are you on getting that done so that they can then jump in and actually be supportive of the bill, if you don't mind me asking you?
So I don't want to expose the vision of the department, but what we've decided, instead of going with the standard veteran definition, which is limited to certain criteria, the department possibly in the future would like to expand that definition beyond what the federal definition is, so allow more people to get benefits. So since we tied it to the federal definition, we decided, or in the discussions, of putting it back to what the current definition of veterans is, with the exception of right now it says armed forces, and we would just update that to uniformed services. So it would expand to all 8 branches, but it wouldn't tie it necessarily to the limited federal definition. I've given them 3 different options, and we're going to be having a meeting with the governor and the department shortly after this hearing. I commit to you, we're going to work together and get this ironed out. I don't think we're far off at all, but I want to make sure that our language complements their vision moving forward. So like I said, they've been very supportive along the way. It's kind of like technical right now to get that, but we'll get it for you.
Okay. Additional questions for the panel? Okay, seeing none, that concludes bill hearing, Senate Bill 275. We're going to next go to a series of departmental bills. We're going to start with, we'll just go in chronological order, Senate Bill 246, and this is a piece of legislation, the Maryland Veterans Trust, et cetera. We've got, okay, yes, we've got Major General Burkhead here in the House. Welcome, Major General Burkhead, as well as David Dragix. You want to come back up here on Senate Bill 246? And again, we're on Senate Bill 246. Well, actually, David, you're actually signed up unfavorable. My apologies. Why don't you take a seat? We're going to let Major General give her presentation favorable, and then we're going to bring you up for your unfavorable testimony. Okay, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chairman Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, and members of the Education, Energy, and Environmental Committee. So good to be here with you today. I want to thank Chair Feldman for serving as the primary sponsor for SB 0246, which seeks to expand the Maryland Veterans Trust to include members of the Maryland National Guard and their families. I'm here today to request support for SB 0246, Maryland Military Department, Maryland Veterans Trust, and Fund membership. The Maryland Veterans Trust, established by the General Assembly in 2013, is a nonprofit organization dedicated to serving Maryland's veterans. The trust fund provides individual grants for temporary financial assistance covering expenses such as rent or mortgage payments, utility bills, and car or insurance payments, all paid directly to the service provider. Additionally, the fund awards grants to charitable organizations offering critical services in areas like housing and food insecurity, suicide prevention, capital improvements of veteran serving spaces, and increased access to health and wellness opportunities. Expanding eligibility to include Maryland National Guard members is a natural progression. National Guard members, like veterans, face many temporary situations, non-emergency financial challenges that this fund is uniquely equipped to address. This proposed legislation does not alter the trust fund's core function, but broadens its scope to better support Maryland citizen airmen, soldiers, and their families. Importantly, the Department of Veterans and Military Families fully supports this measure, as the current funding parameters can absorb the additional Maryland National Guard members. By including National Guard members, SB 0246 ensures that these dedicated service members and their families have access to vital financial assistance during periods of difficulty. In closing, I urge you to vote yes to SB 0246, Maryland Military Department, Maryland Veterans Trust, and Fund membership. Thank you for your time and consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, questions? Okay, since we do have some unfavorable testimony, have you had any conversation with Mr. Dragix, who's sitting right behind you? I don't know what he's going to say, but he's going to be up here unfavorable. If you guys had any...
I have not had any
Okay.
conversations with him.
Okay, yes, Senator Simonaire.
Thank you. It's nice to see you.
Good to see you.
I've been working with your department and Dr.
Yes.
Campbell. He's great person there on the other legislation. But I had a couple quick questions on this because I've been reached out to. So this is a veterans trust. And if I understand this correctly, this will be opening it up to active service members, or just members of the National Guard. So I guess the trust was created for veterans, and now we're expanding it to basically former and current service members.
Yes.
So one thing would be, are we going to change the title? That's a minor thing, but you mentioned the funding, and you said that it could be absorbed in current. So are there no waiting lists? So we're supplying all the veterans currently that have any issues with that?
Yes. So can I address your first piece? Because I think that, and it goes to the conversation about what a veteran is. I think that there's some misunderstanding, and we really have to be specific and apply the term to the situation. It's really situation specific. So in this instance, a veteran, someone who has a 214, like I am a veteran, but I am still currently serving. But I have a veteran, I have a 214 that says I've honorably served, making me a veteran. I go to the VA, I receive VA benefits. It is not a, veteran doesn't mean the same thing as it's meant from long ago. There are lots of young people serving who are considered, younger people that are considered veterans because of their service. The Marylanders, airmen and soldiers who supported COVID-19 operations, almost 1,200 of them are considered veterans because they served under Title 32, 502F. They received a 214. They are entitled to veterans benefits. So you have added a whole category of people to what a veteran is. Not someone who served 20 years and was discharged, not someone who served their 6 years or 4 years of service and discharged. You've added a whole nother category of people when we say veteran. So yes, these private who doesn't earn $43,000, the minimum, the requirement is that you have to be below 300% of poverty rate. So you have a private who is not making $43,000 a year would be eligible for this benefit. truthfully, in Maryland, there are not many, even privates, who make less than $43,000 a year. They usually make more, so it would not be that impactful. I would say in calendar year 2023, the total revenue for the trust fund was $629,000. In dispersed grants were only 402. So there's a delta there, clearly being able to absorb that amount of people. And 22, the balance for the grant was $530,000. Dispersed in grants was $246,000, not even 50%. So if you look at the veterans population, just looking at a swag of what it could be, there are 12,000 reservists, and then you have, add on to that, the 6,000 National Guard members. So only a small portion of that, those under the poverty line, would even be eligible to receive this grant.
Okay, and just following up, just for clarity's sake, so you could serve, just say in the U.S. Army,
Yes.
and then get your DD-214, and then you could, and I don't know the proper term, enlist into the Air National Guard or Army National Guard. You would be considered a veteran because of your previous service, correct?
That's correct.
But if I, who didn't have any military experience and I was younger,
I can waive it.
yeah, enlisted into the National Guard, I would not be considered a veteran, correct?
You could be. If you served, in my example that I gave you for COVID operations, you've never deployed overseas, but you performed under a federal call-up, which COVID operations were, 502F, then you're going to get a 214 at the end of that service, and you can receive veteran benefits at
Right.
the end of that.
So if you're called to active duty, then
Yes,
you
sir.
can get that. Is that what this bill is scope, or is it also saying those who have never been called up to active duty can
Well,
still get benefits?
That's an important piece, because now how are we defining veteran? It goes back to making sure that we are putting it in context. The way that it currently is described, a veteran is a veteran. You receive veteran services, you're a veteran. You got that 214, you're a veteran. You're a veteran.
Right, but in the case where I'm talking about, where I enlist,
Mm-hmm.
I never get called to active duty, but I'm still training once a month, et cetera. I'm not considered a veteran, but I'm serving in the National Guard. Would this apply to me and my family?
It'll apply to anyone in the National Guard.
Okay, right.
Anybody below the poverty line, that.
Okay.
Yes.
And then just one last question, if I could, share. In the last bill I was talking about, I was trying to create consistency through our
Yes, sir.
law, and I see bills coming in, and I see this saying for a veteran, for somebody in the National Guard where they're currently serving or a veteran, either case, what about our reserve units that are residing in our state? Why would they not be included in this as well?
Well, again, I believe that context matters if depending on what the service is, and I'll give you for example, a veteran who may, a reservist may reside in Maryland, but they may drill in Minnesota or California. They may not even be a Maryland resident, but they live in Maryland and their residence is Minnesota or California. So there has to be a determination, does that matter? Because most reservists do not drill where their unit is, or they might not even live in the state where their unit is. So does that matter to you? It might matter when you're talking about specific services. In other instances, it may not matter. It might matter. Our department, the Maryland Military Department, we cover veterans services when it comes to burials. So we right now have a hard time keeping up providing buglers and casket bearers and those things for our veterans that are Marylanders who have served in Maryland. And so when we talk about expanding those services, we're talking about significantly expanding a fiscal note to be able to provide that service to those who have served honorably. And of course we want to, but right now we do that for the entire state and anybody who's considered veteran. Now we're adding another category.
So my last comment on that, given the example I said earlier, if I enlisted into the National Guard, I would qualify under this. But if I enlisted into a reserve unit, I would not qualify under this. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Okay.
But I do believe, though, that, and I'll check my math and I'll get back to you on that. The way this Veterans Trust Fund is written, that if you are in the reserves for this particular piece of legislation, if you're a veteran, you already qualify
Right, veteran.
because of the way that the legislation is currently written. So for this particular piece, the reservists qualify. It's just adding the National Guard explicitly,
Okay, thank you.
yes.
Okay, Senator Augustine.
Thank you, Chair Feldman. Thank you, General Burkhead, for your service to our state. General, does this piece of legislation and providing this benefit to Guard members, would it in any way help with recruitment and retaining of folks in the Guard?
Yes, being able to provide a positive benefit is always a way to retain. We do see soldiers who are in situations where they cannot afford, or young people particularly who are in unstable housing situations. I use that as a specific example because that's what we see many times, is that housing situation is not stable. They're living on couches, et cetera. So this is really a good way of helping you give somebody a boost to get out of a situation if they have that to go to. Granted, it's not a fix, but it does allow for a situation to be improved, and then we can work through other resources to help bring the person out of that negative situation. So it definitely is a positive.
Thank you.
For retention.
Okay, any additional questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you. Thank you, Major
Thank you.
General Burkhead. Okay, I am going to bring up now Mr. Dragix. David Dragix signed up unfavorable. And Mr. Dragix, you're going to have, you're on the 2.5 minute clock, okay?
Thank you. Chair Feldman and members of this committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify in opposition to SB 0246. And for the record, I'm Dave Dragix, Legislative Director of the Maryland Military Coalition, retired Army Colonel. The issue with SB 246 is who is really a veteran. We just addressed this issue in SB 275 to make certain that there can be no misinterpretation of the Maryland Code that defines the term veteran. Simply stated, those who have not met the terms of that definition are not veterans in the true sense of the words. They are, and to use the words that those of us who have served on active duty know, weekend warriors. They have trained only on weekends and 2 weeks of annual training. They have not served on active duty, made the same sacrifices that those who have served have, such as deploying and moving 2 or 3 times, or every 2 or 3 years. In short, certain people did certain things while others who also wore the uniform did not. This bill, as it's written, overlooks that fact. I would ask every member of this committee, especially the member who has served on active duty, how would you respond if one of your constituents who has applied for assistance from the Veterans Trust Fund asked why he, as a veteran, was not approved when someone he knows who's in the National Guard and never served on active duty was approved? What will your answer be? What will you look him in the eye and tell him? Passing this bill will lead to confusion as to who is a true veteran and what benefits they are due, the very reason for the modernization of Maryland's code under SB 275. And for this reason and those in our written testimony, the Maryland Military Coalition respectfully requests an unfavorable report on 246.
Okay, thank you. We've got Senator Watson.
Thank you for your comment. What's the percentage of folks currently on military service who serve in combat arms?
Pardon?
What's the percentage of folks currently in military service who serve in combat arms?
I do not know that.
It's a
at the
very
present
small
time.
amount, so let me help you out. Very small amount.
But there's also combat
It's a
support
very
and combat
small-
service support.
It's a very small amount who actually go in there and dodge bullets. But we have a broad array of folks who go in there and support the warfighter day in and day out.
On active duty.
On active duty. Now, I was a reservist.
Right.
But I got called to active duty on enduring freedom. Is the service that I provided any less commendable than what you're talking about?
And you receive a DD 214?
I absolutely have.
So you're eligible. You're a veteran.
I would, thank you for that. Good to note that, Mr. Chair. But I would hope that we do not dishonor the service of those folks who would be impacted by this bill by trying to create these nuances of those folks who are still in there. It's the equivalent of a police officer. One has a desk job and one's out there on the street beat. And I think that is not the way to go about trying to make sure we honor and respect the service that all of our folks in uniform have done.
Well, I agree with you on that, but when you go to the Veterans Trust portal and take those eligibility questions, one of the questions is right up front is, do you have a DD Form 214?
So there are folks who have served military duty, reservists, who, when they complete their service, they do not get a DD 214?
No, if they complete their service, they should get.
Honorably discharged.
Other than dishonorable, right.
So
and there's also a certificate of satisfactory completion as well.
So a DD 214 is only available to those who in some form or fashion either served active duty or who were deployed if they were in reserve component status.
Anything over 30 days, if you serve, you'll get a DD 214.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any additional questions for our witness? Okay, we've got Senator Simoner.
Thank you. Nice seeing you there, Dave. The way I read it, it says that the trust is set up for veterans and their families.
Right.
So that's one thing. The other says members of the National Guard and their families, independent of whether they're veteran or not. So I don't think they're trying to define veteran. They're saying veterans get it, current law. Then they're going to add members of National Guard and their families, independent of their veteran status.
Which, if they received a DD 214, the members of the National Guard who deployed and came back are still doing an active duty training, but have had the deployment in a DD 214, they qualify. They're eligible.
They're eligible under current law. But I think what this bill is trying to do is saying you don't need a DD 214. You just have to be a member of the National Guard. End of story.
Which then, how does that that dilutes the trust fund, the purpose of the trust fund?
That's certainly an issue, but the one I was bringing up is if we're doing it for National Guard, why wouldn't we do it for somebody like Senator Watson, who was in the reserves? And maybe it's a tiered system, or maybe they're planning on doing that in the future. But look, I want to support as many people as possible, as long as we have enough money, which they said we had enough money to support them all, as long as we're not taken away from our current veterans.
Well, I don't think there's any problem with that if the legislature, if this committee decides to change the nature of the fund and do what 18 other states do, where they have military family relief funds, such as California, Virginia, Connecticut, Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, Arizona. I could give you the list. But that broadens it, which is fine. Then it is inclusive. But if it's going to be a trust fund set up for veterans, then the defined term of veteran, then that makes it for a veteran.
Okay, any additional questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 246. We're going to next move to Senate Bill 254. On behalf of, again, Department of Veterans and Military Families, got Dana Burrell, Deputy Secretary, here in the House. So, Secretary Burrell, why don't you come up? You are the lone witness on this piece of legislation. So you take the time you need.
Thank you. The older I get, the more I need these reading glasses. Good afternoon, Chair Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today on Senate Bill 254. As stated, my name is Dana Burrell. I serve as the Deputy Secretary for Military Family Policy and Programs with the Department of Veterans and Military Families. Our mission is to guide veterans and their families through life's transitions and to position Maryland as the premier state for veterans and their loved ones. To fulfill our mission, we prioritize honoring those who have served by preserving our veteran memorials, as well as enhancing operational efficiency for commissions and boards. Today, I am here to express our support for Senate Bill 254, a bill focused on the War Memorial Commission, the Maryland Veterans Trust Fund, and the Maryland Veterans Commission. The War Memorial Commission, established in 1924, oversees the War Memorial Building with day-to-day operations managed by the City of Baltimore under our agency's oversight. Over time, commissioner appointments and attendance at meetings has declined. To streamline operations, we recommend eliminating the commission and in turn granting oversight responsibilities to our department cemetery and memorial program. Additionally, we propose giving the department the authority to adopt regulations in partnership with the city to ensure the building's historical integrity is preserved. Staff of the City of Baltimore will continue to manage day-to-day operations at the building. Our department's oversight will be high-level, not intended to supplant the city's role in operating the site, and not altering the existing cost-sharing arrangement between our department and the city. Also, to approve efficiency and ensure quorum during our trust fund board meetings, Senate Bill 254 also proposes adjusting the voting status of certain members of the trust fund board. The department appreciates the ongoing support from the state legislature, who often make referrals to the trust fund. We are also mindful of our legislative partner schedules and understand just how busy they are. By changing the voting status for Senate and House appointees, the board will be better equipped to address trust fund matters and reach a quorum despite vacancies or absences, while still ensuring our legislative partners have the opportunity to make contributions to the board. Lastly, this bill addresses challenges in filling seats on the Maryland Veterans Commission due to the aging out or inactivity of certain organizations. We recommend revising membership to include a nonprofit actively serving Maryland's military-connected community. Senate Bill 254 makes membership more inclusive and provides the opportunity for our nonprofit partners to be an additional voice for veterans and military families on the commission. The bill also gives the department discretionary authority to remove certain seats as needed, minimizing the need for future legislative appointments. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today on Senate Bill 254. We respectfully request a favorable vote on the bill and value your continued support of our veterans and military families. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. We've got Senator Simon Ayer, Deputy Secretary.
No hard
Burrell.
questions.
Yeah?
Yeah, I only take easy questions.
I just wanted to publicly congratulate you, Deputy Secretary Burrell. We've had a lot of time working together over the years, and I just appreciate your advocacy for the veterans and working with the legislature, so thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any additional comments, questions? Okay, seeing none. Oh, we've got Senator Washington.
I'll probably just need to, I didn't know the reference so much with Baltimore City. So I chair the city delegation. So you've had conversations with the city about this, and there's a letter of support or anything?
Yes, Senator. We've been in communications with the City of Baltimore's Department of General Services, and they're in support of this.
Okay, okay, Chair, I would like an opportunity for the city delegation to review this bill. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, any additional questions? Okay, seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 254. Major General Burkhead, why don't you come back up here? I didn't pick up on the fact you had a second bill here, otherwise I would have taken you straight up. But we're on Senate Bill 255, and you are the only witness on this bill, Senate Bill 255.
Give me an opportunity to say I am Major General Janine Burkett, Adjutant General for State of Maryland. Thank you. So good afternoon, Chairman Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, and members of the Education, Energy, and Environment Committee. It is a sincere thank you to Chair Feldman for agreeing to serve as a primary sponsor for SB 0255, which authorizes the Adjutant General to appoint their direct staff in the Maryland Military Department. SB 0255 would simply place in statute the operational reality of the Adjutant General to appoint their senior staff. Removing this antiquated and confusing part of Public Safety Article 13-306 meets Governor Moore's FY26 budget principles of modernizing government. Direct control over personnel will allow future adjutants general to manage their workforce more efficiently and effectively. The Adjutant General is an appointee of the governor and the lead state official of the Maryland Military Department. To have a chief of staff and aides appointed by and serve at the pleasure of the governor is not consistent with Section 13-302, which allows the Adjutant General to appoint key select staff. This would have a potential impact on the chain of command and endanger the highly regarded cohesion of the department. The Adjutant General has the statutory authority under Section 13-302 to appoint a range of key positions within the department, including a Chief of State Operations, an Executive Officer, an Administrative Officer, and several other critical roles. The Chief of Staff for the Maryland Military Department functions in a capacity similar to those senior leaders, making it logical and consistent for the Adjutant General to have the authority to appoint this position as well. The governor will continue to have the authority to appoint significant leadership roles, such as the Assistant Adjutant Generals for both Army and Air, as well as the Deputy Assistant Adjutant General. This bill therefore seeks to eliminate redundancy and confusion by aligning the appointment of the Chief of Staff with the existing practice and statutory framework that grants the Adjutant General the ability to appoint key civilian and uniformed senior leaders within the department. Thank you for your time and consideration, and I am able to take questions.
Okay, any questions for the Major General? Okay, seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 255. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, Senate Bill 260. We're going to call John Woolhams up here. John, I see you there, as Christian Skipper as well from Maryland, both from the Department of General Services. And this is another departmental bill. And John, why don't you want to lead off? These are departmental bills, so we don't need to, we're not timing anybody here. Okay? John, why don't you start?
Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair Kagan, members of the committee, John Woolhams with the Department of General Services. Pleased to be here today to testify in support of Senate Bill 260, a bill to correct an oversight in a previous omnibus bill to clean up language related to forms management in state agencies. And I have with me today the department's Director of Records Management to explain the rationale for the bill. The written testimony explains in much more detail the history of the legislative review and cleanup, and this is a minor but meaningful oversight from that previous work. Thank you.
Sir, can tell us your name.
Yes, hello, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Christian Skipper. I serve as the Director of Records Management at the Department of General Services, and just wanted to urge a favorable report on this bill today. As a bit of background, the General Assembly voted in 2023 to eliminate DGS's comprehensive forms report after a review determined that it was one of various reports deemed obsolete, duplicative, impractical, inefficient, or otherwise unnecessary. Unfortunately, the corresponding requirement for state agencies to submit their own individual forms reports to DGS was not eliminated at that time. Since these submissions no longer serve their intended purpose of providing the underlying data for that final report to the General Assembly, we believe that removing it would eliminate unnecessary labor and free up employees to focus on mission-critical responsibilities at their agencies. The timing on this couldn't be better, since SB 260 would also support the governor's recent executive order encouraging government efficiency. Once more, I urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Okay, Vice Chair Kagan, and then Senator Hester after.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mine is a statement, not a question. Mr. Woolhams, I just wanted to thank you for your 23-plus years of service to our Maryland's boards of education, and your support and advocacy for them and for our students and school systems really was important, and you've been great. And the Department of General Services, Secretary Chowdhury was very smart to bring you on. I also want to give a shout out to our friend Ellen Robertson, who has recently retired, and you've got some big shoes to step into, and I just loved working with her. So look forward to continuing to work with you in your new capacity. Isn't that so?
Yes, that was a
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
very difficult question. Okay, Senator Hester.
Thank you, and it's good to see you both. I'm just kind of curious. I mean, what material would be in a form?
Yes, so the forms report, we at DGS, we don't receive individual forms from agencies. We receive a report of the forms that the agency produces. So it describes the number of forms in a year that are revised, the number of forms that are discontinued, and the number of new forms created. It's all aggregate numbers.
But could you just give me an example of a form that, like, the Maryland Department of the Environment might keep? Like,
Yes, so forms, actually I can give you an example from DGS, the one that I'm most familiar with, is records retention schedules are a type of form that DGS uses. These describe the individual record types at an agency. But otherwise, really, a form would be functionally any piece of paper, a template onto which a member of the public would write information and turn into an agency.
okay.
And it strikes me, it doesn't need to be a member of the public. Forms could be internal to government. So like the retention schedule form is an internal government form.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's actually a requirement, you know, somewhere in our codes that says that agencies should be keeping all of their buildings like kind of like up to date.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been trying for years to, you know, kind of collect a list of the older buildings that the state has. And so I do know that there's some data collection kind of like issues. And so I was just kind of curious what we're actually losing by not having these forms like tracked.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. What we would be losing from this specific bill would be fairly limited. This is strictly agencies reporting to me just the number of forms they create or discontinue. In the past, there was a comprehensive forms report that described that across the state. That was the portion that was eliminated back in 2023. But it doesn't really go into any meaningful detail about the content or subject matter of the forms anyway. So that's what led us to the conclusion that this was ultimately not having a meaningful benefit to the agencies or the state residents.
Would you be able to share with me offline like the copy of a report from, like, say, last year?
Absolutely.
And then what about a copy of the report prior to the change in 2023?
Yes, I can share with you the comprehensive annual forms report that DGS, the last one that we submitted in 2022, as well as one of the ones that an agency sent to me that provided the data for that report.
That would be awesome. And then just, have you seen the note the DLS says that should the bill be enacted, the department would still have to submit its annual report prior to the fiscal year by July 31st, since the effective bill's date is October 1st?
Yes, we wholeheartedly agree with that.
So you want one last report?
No, we agree with DLS's suggestion to move that effective date up to July 1st so that we don't have that final set of reports.
So we'll be submitting an amendment to that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, cool,
We are
thanks.
requesting an amendment to move the effective date to July 1 from October to avoid the unintended consequence of Christian having to receive one more year's worth of agency forms reports. Thank you.
Okay, any additional questions? Okay, seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 260, which takes us, thank you. We're going to go to Senate Bill 261, from the state, dealing with the State Board of Public Accountancy. I'm going to call up John Dove and Christopher Dorsey, Department of Labor. Are they here? Okay, Mr. Dorsey's virtual, sorry. John, you're here in person, so you're going to start off.
Yes, sir.
This committee had a lot of experience last session with sunset extension, so we have experts in this committee on that topic. So John, you take the lead. Again, Senate Bill 261.
Good afternoon, Chair Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, and members of the Education, Energy, and Environment Committee. For the record, my name is John Dove, and I serve as the Commissioner for Occupational and Professional Licensing within the Maryland Department of Labor. Today, I'm testifying in support with information for the committee's consideration on SB 261. Online is our Executive Director, Chris Dorsey, who's here to answer questions should I not be able to answer them. This bill proposes to continue the Maryland Board of Public Accountancy, which is scheduled to terminate and be of no effect after July 1st, 2025. This bill will continue the board through July 1, 2030. It is necessary to extend the Maryland Board of Public Accountancy, which is scheduled to terminate after July 1, 2025, for the safety and welfare of all Maryland citizens by ensuring that CPAs can continue to become licensed and maintain that licensure throughout the state. Also, this will allow the board to continue to make sure that CPAs are held in compliance. Maryland was the third state in the country that created the professional designation or certified public accountant. Currently, there are a total of 19,206 CPA licensees and firms in Maryland. Without the Maryland Board of Public Accountancy, these licensees would no longer be able to use the title they work so hard to earn. Also, they may have to gain licensure in states which will reduce the amount of revenue generated in Maryland. Licenses are processed by the board staff as soon as all the requirements have been met by candidates, usually within a week, except in certain cases where approval or denial is required by the board members. In these cases, the applications are reviewed at the next board meeting. The board receives approximately 80 complaints in a fiscal year. These complaints are typically resolved within 60 days unless the complainant or respondent requests an extension to respond to the complaint. We believe that those individuals who choose to become a CPA should have the right to legally work in Maryland, stay licensed in Maryland, and offer protection to the hardworking citizens of the state who require the use of an accountant who is held in compliance by the board. With that, I respectfully request a favorable report by the committee on SB 261. Executive Director Dorsey and myself are happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Mr. Dorsey, before we take questions, you want to add anything to was just testified by Mr. Dove? Anything, any additional comments, and then we'll take some questions? Or are you just here for questions?
He's just here for questions,
Okay.
sir.
Okay, any questions for either of the two witnesses from Department of Labor on this sunset extension? We're going to go to Senator Hester.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I'd just like to acknowledge that the Department of Labor added a Section 2 here that conforms with how we passed most of our bills last year, and say thank you to the Department of Labor for that.
I don't have any additional information or anything. I would just like to echo the same sentiments as Commissioner Dove in support of this bill.
We got a lag. We got a little lag there.
Acknowledge that the Department of Labor added a Section 2 here.
He might.
You want to go mute him? You might be.
Okay, we're good. Do you have a question, Senator Hester, beyond that
My
comment?
question was about the 80-some complaints. Can you just give us a broad overview about what types of complaints you receive?
That is one I have to have Executive Director Dorsey. I'm not sure what type of complaints we'd be looking at.
Yes, Secretary Dorsey, can you hear us? Because we seem to have a little bit of a delay here between. Can you hear me?
You shouldn't be on YouTube.
Yeah, are you on YouTube? Okay. Can you hear me? Yeah, you have to. Can you turn off your YouTube? Don't watch it on YouTube. Dorsey, can you hear us? Because we seem to have a little bit of a delay here between.
Okay. Senator Hester, I can always get you a list of all of the complaints that are available.
I still think there's a little lag here. Yeah. Okay, maybe I think that might be, Mr. Dorsey, can you, did you get the question? Did you hear the question? Because again, I think you have your YouTube on, and that's causing a little bit delay with us asking you and you hearing us in real time. Okay.
Okay.
See if that works. Can you hear, how about right now? Can you say testing 1, 2, 3 in response to my testing 1, 2, 3?
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Okay, now we're good. Okay, the question from Senator Hester was about the nature of the kinds of complaints the State Board of Accountancy might have with regard to CPAs, et cetera. And she was looking for a little information, some detail on that, okay?
Okay. So most of the complaints that we receive are consumer complaints, in which we'll receive the complaint from the complainant. They have 30 days to issue any supporting documentation, and then in response, the respondent, who is the CPA, would have an additional 30 days to send in their response, and then the complaint committee for the board decides how to resolve it. Then most of the complaints are normally centered around fee disputes, things dealing with preparation of taxes.
Okay. Any additional questions? Okay, thank you. That concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 261, which brings us to our final bill for today from Senator Kagan, Senate Bill 138. And it involves 911.
Hey, Jazz, thank you for being here.
And Senator, we've got, well, you don't really have a panel. We do have two witnesses signed up favorable. Okay, Chaz Eby and Anna Sierra, is that who we have at the table?
This hearing should break land speed records, Mr.
Okay.
Chair. For the
Okay.
record, Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville, and deeply invested in 911, next generation 911, after 3 people have died in my district. Several years ago, I sponsored a bill, and this body approved it, that we make the Maryland Emergency Management Agency, MEMA, into a cabinet-level department, the Maryland Department of Emergency Management. So Secretary Strickland sits on the cabinet, and there is that level of respect and engagement. And when we did that, we just left off one thing, which was they need to be able to have regulatory authority. This simply provides MDEM with regulatory authority. I was asked to sponsor the bill by MDEM, and Chaz and Anna will add any additional explanation, and we can all take questions. Thank you for your time and attention.
Okay, so.
Request a favorable report. Thank you.
Okay, so again, tell everybody your name, and then you've got 2.5 minutes, okay?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and Madam Vice Chair, for having us here. Members of the committee, Chaz Eby, the Deputy Secretary of the Maryland Department of Emergency Management, joined by my colleague Anna Sierra, who's our Chief Development and Legislative Officer. But really special thanks to Senator Kagan, not only for sponsoring the bill, but being a steadfast champion for 911. She's covered the salient points here. It's largely an administrative and technical fix, but an important one for the board and the department, and we urge and hope for a favorable report. So thank you for having me, and we're happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you. Why don't you pass that mic to your right and get that close so everybody in the world can hear your testimony? Okay.
As Deputy Secretary Eby said, I'm Anna Sierra. I'm the Chief Development and Legislative Officer for the Department of Emergency Management, and I am simply here to answer any questions that the committee may have for me today.
Okay, that was pretty straightforward. We've got Senator Hester with a question.
Thank you. It's great to see you all. I was just curious, what type of regulations do you anticipate you might want to promulgate?
So thank you, Senator, for the question. So for the 911 board, they do have, they ensure standards across the public safety answering points. So while we don't have any specifically in mind, the Code of Maryland regulations right now is outdated. It has outdated codes and regs in there. We'd fix those up and then would authorize them to make additional standards as necessary.
Okay, any additional questions? Okay, seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 138. It concludes our bill hearings for today. So we're going to take a 5-minute or so break, and we're going to have a pretty short voting session. Before you leave, though, one thing, for those of you interested in the avian flu issue, which has hit parts of the, dealing with bird flu, a lot of press. We now have some accounts here in Maryland. There's going to be a briefing tomorrow by the Department of Agriculture at the Environment and Transportation Committee at 2 o'clock. I didn't think it was worth a joint hearing, et cetera, joint briefing, but we're invited. Anybody here who wants to attend 2 o'clock over the E&T committee, it's going to be Department of Agriculture and Department of Health and Department of Natural Resources doing a joint briefing. But if anybody here wants to go, we're invited. The only ask is they want to get a head count, and so we RSVP to Trish over in Environment and Transportation if you think that's something of interest to you. So that said, see you back here in 5 minutes for a pretty short. Sir. We're off, right? Well.